Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahi wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een wa ba'd. The purpose of this program every year is to highlight the achievements, the accomplishments, the excellent lives of legendary individuals who came in this ummah, made a massive impact, created a massive difference, and left an amazing legacy. The reason we speak about the legacy of these individuals is to ignite within all of us a spark, to create within us a desire to have an impact and to realize our potential that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has blessed all of us with. Now if you look at the people during the time of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the one example is that of Sayyidina Arkam radiallahu anhu. We know in Makkah, the very first madrasa, the very first Islamic educational institute in Makkah was known as Darul Arkam. But Darul Arkam was donated by Arkam for the cause of Islam when Arkam was 15 years old. Firstly, Arkam at the age of 15 owned a house for starters. The second point, Arkam had the tawfiq, he had the foresight, he had the wisdom and the intelligence to realize the importance of donating that house in the path of Allah, and that house became the very first madrasa in the history of Islam on the outskirts of Makkah. This is the house where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to teach from. Then I'll give you another example of legendary individuals in the history of Islam. The other example is Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. The very last army that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dispatched before he left this world was the army of Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. Under the leadership of Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu, there were important leading Sahaba under his leadership. But he was just 19 years old. And that was the last army dispatched by Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Let me tell you, gents, something even more fascinating. He was 19 when he was leading that army. 5 years before that, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam faced a situation where people had accused Aisha radiallahu anha. And now Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam needed to deal with that situation. So it was a situation related to his household matters, but it was also a situation related to the Muslim Ummah, because Aisha radiallahu anha is the mother of the believers. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam needed to consult some people. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam consulted 3 people in order to make this important decision. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam consulted Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam consulted a slave girl. And the third person that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam consulted was Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu. Now at the age of 19 it was when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam left this world. But at the point when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam consulted him, it was 5 years before Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam left this world. How old was Usama bin Zayd radiallahu anhu? He was 14 years old, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was consulting him on matters related to his marriage sallallahu alayhi wasallam and matters of interest for the entire Muslim Ummah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was consulting him at the age of 14. It would mean that he was worthy of consultation. It would mean that his opinion was not some opinion just about Minecraft and Call of Duty. His opinion as this 14-year-old was sound opinion, that he could give counsel to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he was just 14 years old. Let me give you guys another example. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he migrated to Medina, then a young man who set the foundations of Islam in Medina, his name was Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anhu. So he set the foundations of Islam in Medina. But on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's arrival in Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was now evaluating the outcomes of the efforts of Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiallahu anhu. And he was speaking to the people in Medina and seeing how much they had learned. Amongst the people who came to meet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was a young boy by the name of Zayd radiallahu anhu. He came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he says, "O Nabi of Allah, what I have to present is that I have a good memory and I was able to memorize parts of the Quran." So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked him, "Okay, recite." And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard him reciting the Quran. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam acknowledged and was impressed with his memory capacity. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam kept that in mind. 11 years old, gents. How old? 11 years old. 11-year-olds are not even allowed at the Deen team. The starting point is 13. At 11, listen to how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had harnessed his potential. 1 year had gone by. Either he was 12 or 13 at the time. And now there was a need of the ummah. The need of the ummah at this point was that they were dependent on external and outsourced translators to translate the correspondence that had come from the Jewish people, the correspondence in Hebrew. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam needed an internal translator. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked amongst the people, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept it in his mind that Zayd radiallahu anhu is an outstanding youngster, he has outstanding capacity. So he called on Zayd and he told him, you learn the Hebrew language. Zayd radiallahu anhu took on this responsibility passionately. He went for it full out and he started learning the Hebrew language. Gents, believe it or not, within a period of 8 days, Zayd radiallahu anhu returned to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in this 8-day period, Zayd radiallahu anhu had learned and mastered the Hebrew language in 8 days. We know how we dribble in our Afrikaans paper. And we started Afrikaans in grade 1 till matric, we still grubbling, brah. 8 days to learn the Hebrew language. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam acknowledged that achievement, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent Zaydina Zayd radiallahu anhu to learn the second language, which was a language called the Syriac language. He studied, he focused, and in a matter of 12 days, he learned and he mastered the Syriac language. 2 whole languages in a matter of 20 days. Subhanallah, brothers. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, now seeing his potential maturing, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was now nurturing him for a greater task. What was the greater task? You see, every Ramadan, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam used to descend, and Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam used to recite the Quran to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will in turn do door and recite to Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam the amount that was revealed until the point of that Ramadan. So each Ramadan, as the amount of Quran would increase, they would do the door and it would be more Quran. The unique thing was that in the last Ramadan of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah had ordered Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do the Quran twice, and Jibreel alayhi salam to also recite the Quran twice. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called on Zayd radiallahu anhu and told him that when we are doing this door sessions, when we are reciting the Quran, then you sit in and you listen to these sessions. Gents, can you imagine? Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reciting, Jibreel alayhi salam is reciting, and Zayd, this young man, is sitting in and listening to their recitation. Can you imagine how amazing that must have been? So he sat in, he listened for that entire year. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his foresight, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a bigger plan. So during the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the Sahaba radiallahu anhu engaged in a battle. And in that particular battle, we had lost many huffaz of the ummah. So it was a major setback. Until that point, there was no compiled Quran. We would rely on the memorization of the huffaz in our midst during the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. But after this particular battle, there was a large number of huffaz that had passed away, and now people became concerned. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu per se was very concerned that if we do not create a system of preserving the Quran, then the Quran will be lost as the huffaz passed away. So now what we need to do is, we need to compile one single manuscript of the Quran so that the entire ummah can have one standard manuscript so that the Quran won't be lost. And now when they needed to take on this big task, they searched through the people for the most suitable person amongst the people, and they had identified Zayd, that you sat in on the last door session of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Jibreel alayhi salam. This is what makes you suitable. So you should be involved with the compilation of the Quran. And now when they were gathering the Quran, it was Zayd radiallahu anhu who sat for the compilation of the Quran. And this was done during the time of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Then again during the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, they wanted to redo the project and refine the project further. And lo and behold, when they needed to look for someone, they looked for the young man, Sayyidina Zayd radiallahu anhu, and he was in charge of the compilation of the Quran. And today when you go into the masjid and you take that Quran out of the bookshelf, it's the very same manuscript that was worked on by Sayyidina Zayd radiallahu anhu when he sat in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as a young man. This is the result of him being mentored by Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I mention these things saying to you, O lovers of Allah, this is the potential of the youth. The youth have always assisted the mission of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The youth always played an important role. You have this potential to make a difference. Set your sights very high. Set your aspirations very high. Set your ambitions very high. Let me give you an example of high ambitions. One of our legends in Islamic history, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, personally my favorite sahabi radiallahu anhu, he was known to be an outstanding wrestler radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And by the way, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was an even better wrestler. So there's a book released in the UK called The Grappling of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. A book which I suggest everybody reads. The grappling and the wrestling of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Anyway, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu used to make a dua. Allahumma rzuqni shahadatan fi sabilik. Oh Allah, bless me with martyrdom in your path. Wa fi baladi rasulik. And let it happen in the city of Medina, the city of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Hafsa radiallahu anha used to say, oh my father, how can that happen? How can you ask for martyrdom in jihad, but at the same time it should happen in Medina? Because martyrdom happens in the battlefield and not in Medina. Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu used to say, my father, your dua is not adding up. You want to pass away in jihad, but you want it to happen in Medina. You can't have your bread buttered on both sides. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu had ambition. And he knew that if he has foresight and focus, and he has great aspiration, Allah Jalla Jalal will facilitate it. And Allah Jalla Jalal will make it happen. His second dua that he used to make, oh Allah, don't let it be that the person who takes my life, don't let it be somebody who makes sajda. Meaning, don't let there be conflict between the Muslims through me. Don't let it be that a Muslim takes my life. So he had three requirements in his dua. The first is, oh Allah, let me pass away in your path in jihad. The second was, oh Allah, let it happen in Medina. The third, oh Allah, make it, and Medina is a city full of Muslims. Oh Allah, let it be that it is not perpetrated by a believer. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was mediating in a conflict between a Sahabi radiallahu anhu and a person by the name of Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. Abu Lu'lu, the fire worshipper from Iran. And he was mediating in this conflict. And when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu gave guidance, Abu Lu'lu was not happy with the guidance. But Abu Lu'lu was a man who used to manufacture arms and arrows and knives. So Abu Lu'lu that day made a promise that I'm going to take the life of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Eventually on one morning, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was leading the Sahaba in Salah. And he was reciting Surah Yusuf. And he was reciting in such a beautiful manner. And he went into ruku. And then eventually he went into sajda. And while Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu was in sajda, the masjid was dark. Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi smuggled himself into the masjid. And he took a knife which was sharp on both ends. And he stabbed Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu up to 9 times. When this happened, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said, the dog had killed me. And eventually he fell unconscious. And he went into the house. And eventually when he regained his consciousness, he asked the people who had stabbed me. And as soon as they said it was Abu Lu'lu, he was relieved that a Muslim had not stabbed me. And he was happy that it was somebody who wasn't a Muslim, because he didn't want a Muslim to be implicated in this type of a thing. Eventually, after a few days of agony and difficulty, in the city of Medina, whilst being a martyr, a person who was leading the Sahaba in Salah, under those circumstances, the dua of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, Allahumma rzuqni shahadatan fi sabilik, oh Allah, bless me with martyrdom in your path. وَفِي بَلَدِ رَسُولِكَ, exactly as he made the dua transpired ditto, spot on, exactly on the dua of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And under those circumstances he passed away. Remember, the youth have achieved great things, set great aspirations, make a massive impact, live a life which is larger than the average life, and create a legacy that people continue to benefit from. May Allah give us the understanding. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.